Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. We are on day 100, right? Day 100. That means to say that we have been learning this for approximately 100 weeks, give or take, because sometimes we do more than one, and sometimes we don't even do one. We just do something else, right? So probably it evens itself out, and probably on week 100 of learning this book. And thank you all for being part of this journey. I greatly appreciate it. So let's get cracking, and then we'll schmooze a little bit afterwards. So the dilemma, interesting dilemma, and I think this plays out in many different ways. It's just they gave a scenario like this, and I would say that this is probably your classic case of the dilemmas that we have, the majority of the dilemmas that we have. And other ones are, certain circumstances and things like that. This is probably your typical kind of dilemma. You heard your neighbor Yosef tell another neighbor Shaul that he shouldn't let his children play in the home of still another neighbor, Reuven. Right? Reuven's wife is a space cadet. Right? Yosef said she doesn't keep an eye on the kids. My 4-year-old once played there, and he wrote all over himself with a permanent marker. You feel that Reuven should know that his home and family are being besmitched. You guys know what besmitched means? All right, besmitched. It's a Yiddish word, an English Yiddish word. We call it English, right? It's like being made dirty, right? Add that to your vocabulary, besmitched, right? But he has a bad temper and will very likely retaliate harshly against Yosef. What should you do? Right, so there's a lot of different caveats to this case. Right, number one, right, this are you allowed to tell? So it could fall under. I'm just going to keep quiet. What do you guys think? I'm not going to give you any insights.
I would not tell the neighbor this. I would go over and observe when my kid was there to make sure my kid's okay. But this is just one person's opinion. If we ran every time someone said one thing bad about somebody, we wouldn't be able to work. We'd have to do that all day long.
Okay.
And nothing good is going to come of him telling him what the neighbor said.
Okay, so just to make sure you all heard what Jim said, right? So Jim is saying the source of this whole case doesn't have any legs because he's saying there's no toelis, there's no purpose for you to say anything to people, right? No good will come out of it. That's what it means by toelis, right? And therefore, right, there's no reason in the world why you should be allowed to say anything to Reuven, right? All you're going to do is just create him to have bad feelings, right? If he has anger, if he has a temper, he doesn't have a temper. Jim thinks that's just an added, just added to make it a little more exciting, right? But he said besides that point, right, even if he was a nice, sweet guy, right? But still, you wouldn't say anything because there's no purpose, no good will come out of it, and that's just creating animosity between two people, and that's called rechilas. Right? That is Jim's opinion. Anybody else?
I agree with Jim.
Okay, Jim, you got a fan. Suzette.
Thank you, Suzette.
Signed, sealed, delivered.
All right, I wouldn't necessarily, put my sides with Jimmy. I'm just kidding. We like Jim. Okay, anybody else? Anybody else want to chime in? No. Okay, I see we're very quiet today. Okay, so I would say like this: if there's really no purpose, there's no gain, so then you're right. The question is like this: you have to know, and this is really where every scenario makes a difference, right? We have to know that these social gatherings are extremely important, right? And if the word is getting out that not to play in Yatsen Patzel's house, right, and their kids are not going to be able to have play dates, right? So then, and this one person is saying something, right? So you're right, it's their one opinion, but these things spread like wildfire. Right, unfortunately, right, and one person, oh yeah, I heard, and this and that, and before you know it, right, Yatsen Patzel's house, the kids are not going to have any play dates anymore, right, and there is a reason, there is a toelis. The one could say there is a toelis. Again, it depends on the scenario, because if Reuven, right, or let's call him Yatsen Patzel, right, could go ahead and talk to Yosef and say, hey, why there might have been one time when you came. The house is crazy. You're not sorry that happened, right? You know, we just had a baby or whatever it is. It was a bad time. You're right, but you know, please, you know, it's not right. My kids want to have play dates in the house. You know, we want to have people over, and you know, this is really not the right thing to do. And you know, please stop saying that, right? Because you're hurting my kids just by spreading this, that they can have friends over into the house, and that is detrimental. It is. Play dates are very important to say, okay, so they could always go to other people, but that's not, it doesn't work that way, right? You come to my house, I come to your house. That's how it works. And if you're now spreading something that will stop people, which could be hurtful to your kids. So there, I could see where there could be a toelis over here. There could be a reason for it. Bonnie, I'll take your question 1 second, right? There could be a reason. Again, and this is where every scenario makes a difference. Depends on what's being said, right? It depends on who is being affected by it, right? And therefore, but this is something that is a very common thing, right? Talking about other people's homes, talking about, oh, you know, that there's every time I go to the house is a wreck, right? It's just a wreck, right? I just can't imagine living like that, right? And you know, I just don't like going there for a meal when they invite me, because, you know, they always just serve like, you know, this plain chicken. You know, they don't know how to spice their food, right? So, you know, that's your feeling. Could be yes, could be not, right? But these are social things that are very common, that people just, they don't feel they're saying anything bad, right? I'm not saying they're bad people, and I'm not saying that, you know, they're children killers, and I'm not saying that, you know, they robbed the bank, right? I'm not saying that, right? I'm not saying they're you know, I'm not saying bad things. I just, you know, just making people aware of my observation of their social life, or how they deal with certain things. I'm not saying they're bad. It's just my opinion. This is, I would say, probably the nucleus of times that we get into trouble, right? The more extreme things, we stop and think for a second, right? Okay, I'm not that kind. I'm not going to, you know, tell people about this and that, you know, but on these things is where, and then yes, every scenario has its toel. You have to see if there's a toelis there or not. If there's no toelis, then Jim's right? So I'm not saying Jim is wrong, right? I'm just saying if there's no toelis, right? So then Jim is right. If there's no toelis, then the whole thing doesn't start up, right? Because there's no reason just to create animosity. That guy's wrong, right? If you're able to go over to that guy and say, hey, you know, what you're doing is really not right. You know, that's your opinion. Could be yes, could be not, you know, but, you know, it's not right what you're doing. All right, you're hurting the family, whatever. It's not, you're saying bad things about the family. You know, it's not, you know, we're not talking about life and death, that people are going to get hurt or something like that. So, you know, you could do that sometimes, but it really depends on how far it goes. So I have a feeling, and that's why I think they added in, and Bonnie, I'll take your question after I just finish. I'm sorry, right? That they feel that there is a toelis over here, like we explained, because, well, it's harming the kids of what, you know, there's social standards in the community, and people coming over and things like that, which is very important. Is extremely important. You know, those, it's not something to, you know, it's not, what is considered important and not important is not necessarily just physical life and death. It's emotional also. Being able to have friends and being part of a group and things like that, right? So I think that's why they added the caveat over here of where this person gets angry, right? You know, and has a bad temper and could be will retaliate or do something back. That is why they brought this case in, because this could be a standard case. If there's toelis, yes. If there's no toelis, no. Why do I need another whole case created over here? So I think they're bringing this caveat is, well, there is toelis, but you now have a fear that the person might, when you tell the person he has a bad temper and he might go ahead and harm the other person. And that is where your dilemma is. On one hand, you want to tell the family because it is toelis, and they will get, the kids could get hurt, and you know they should try to set the record straight. But on the other hand, you fear that they're going to set the record straight in a harsh way, in a bad way, and you're scared that someone might physically or emotionally or the other person might get hurt also, what do you do? Bonnie, what do you want to say?
If I had already been to that person's house or my child has played at that person's house, then, and I was sort of a part of the conversation, you could also say, like, counter what this person is saying and say, oh, you know, my children have had several play dates there. They've always had fun. It's a very relaxed atmosphere. Or, you know, however, to one, carelessness for Space Cadet, it could be looked at like that. It could also be looked at, it's a fun home. It's you're very comfortable.
Right. So, but Bonnie, you're right. If I have information to be able to say something, you should say something. And we mentioned that. The question is, are you allowed to say something to the person that is being spoken to, being spoken about, right? Right. It goes without a doubt. If you have information that you could say something, you should to the person that said something, or, you know, or to go over to, Shaul and say, hey, listen, I know you might have heard something, but I just want to let you know that I've been to that house. You know, it's a fun house. Yeah, it's a little more loose, but some people like to be a little more rigid with their kids. They're a little more loose with their kids, but it's not, they're responsible parents and things like that. Yeah, if you have personal knowledge, of course you should, right? That's without a doubt. The question over here is, right, should you go over and tell Ruvain, right, the person that the house is being talked about, right, and tell them that someone is talking about their house. Right, that's where Rechilas is, right? Rechilas says if there's no purpose for that, so now what you're doing is you're creating a mosity between two different people. You're telling Ruvain that Yosef talked negative about you, so you're creating a mosity in between the two of them, right? That is what the question is. So if you have a way, if you could talk to Yosef or not, right? If you could, good. If you can't, don't, right? But whatever that may be, the question is, are you allowed to tell Reuven something, the person that is being talked about, right? And that's what we're saying, right? If it's a normal case where there's no danger to the person, not scared the person's going to get all mad or whatever it is, like really mad, not like, can't believe it, but like his anger will retaliate in a bad way, right? So if we don't have that concern, so then this is a classic Toelis case. If there's a purpose, kids are not going to play dates, right? Their social standing is going to change, things like that. So then, yes, you're allowed to say something. Hey, just wanted to let you know. Maybe you want to go speak to Yosef and set the record straight, or So then there's Toelis. You're allowed to do that. If there's no Toelis, there's no, it's just a person, someone talking, but there's no real outcome that's really going to be a bad outcome. So then you're not allowed to say something because that's Rechilas. Question in this scenario is where you have an added caveat. You have Toelis, right? You have a purpose. Kids are not going to play dates, blah, blah, blah. Right? But now you have a different concern. What overrides what? You know that Reuven has a very bad temper and he could retaliate in a bad way. What is a bad way? It doesn't mean to say killing him, God forbid. Could be he's going to dump his garbage on his lawn. I don't know, right? Could be he'll start saying negative things about Yosef, right? So he will. So you're going to create some kind of hurt to Reuven, even though Reuven was wrong and hurting Yosef. Yosef is wrong and hurting Reuven, right? But are you allowed to say something to Reuven now to set the record straight because his family is being harmed? But doing that, you're going to create more hurt because Reuven's going to go ahead and retaliate against Yosef. That's the dilemma over here. Suzette, you wanted to say something?
Yes, I think you answered it when you explained what overrides, whether Rechilas overrides Toelis. So what I'm taking away from your last statements is that in this situation, the careless speech does not justify, or what can be construed as harmful speech does not justify your constructive intent, but there are circumstances where the reverse holds true. Is that correct?
Right. That's what we're saying. If there's a reason to tell Reuven, right, the person that is being talked about, that someone said something about his family, right? Or in other cases, someone said about your business, or if there's a constructive reason that the person's being harmed, right? And he will be able to do something to protect his family or to protect his business or things like that, right? So that is your classic toelis, right? Rechilas is you are saying something about, you're telling someone that someone did or said something about them or their family or their business, right? So that is creating animosity, right? That's creating friction because you're telling someone that someone did something bad against them, right? That is a classic rechilas. But if there's a reason that Reuven should know, meaning to say not just because someone said something about it, he should know that someone said something about him, but there's actually a positive reason. He could fix his business. He could do a different kind of campaign. He could go and talk to the person and say, hey, why are you saying this about my family, right? You know, can you please, you know, can I clarify something? When you came, I remember what happened, blah, 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 right? So then if there's a purpose for that, he could clarify, and the harm is a significant harm, like his children are not going to have any more play dates, or his business is going to go kaput because everybody thinks that his pizza has, you know, acid inside. I don't know. I'm just saying something crazy, you know, has a Drano part of the, I don't know what, right? It's killing people, or it just has a bad taste or whatever it is, right? Something not so extreme, right? So then there's a purpose for saying this. That's called toelis, right? And we went through the different categories of toelis. Then you're allowed to go ahead and say something, right? That's your classic case, right? But over here, the dilemma is that if you tell Reuven, you're allowed to tell Reuven, but if you tell Reuven, Reuven has a bad temper and he's going to go ahead and retaliate, right? So now there's an extra caveat. What you're allowed to tell Reuven, that Yosef said something bad about him, right? Because it's hurting his family, this and that. But now by telling Reuven, he might go ahead and hurt Yosef. Are you allowed to go ahead and say something, yes or no? That's the dilemma over here. Emily, welcome. It's nice to see you. Any thoughts?
Yeah.
Morning. Go ahead, Judy. What?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt Emily.
No, go ahead.
Say something. I was just going to say, I think a third aspect that I don't think has been mentioned is husband and wife. The husband, the father, the husband of the woman who was allowing this to happen could also get very angry with his wife for, I don't know. I'm just saying, I think there's more dynamics that could be involved than.
No, your point is 100% correct. You always have to try to see all the different angles, right? That we are assuming that the husbands are not going to think that this actually, he's going to be, that's the thing where he's going to be angry that someone is saying something about his wife. He knows his wife, right? He knows if his wife is careless or not careless, right? You know, or vice versa. If the husband is careless or not careless, right? If you have to tell a wife, right? The dilemma over here is by telling, but you're right. If it could be that you think that the husband is going to lash out at his wife because someone is speaking like this about him, so that's that you're not allowed to, right? Also. And let's just get to the answer, right? Which if your report might cause undue harm to the subject, right? To either the person that talked about this family, or like you're saying, Judy, to the wife. If the husband is a control freak and he thinks, oh my gosh, people are telling my wife that she's this, he's going to clamp down on her, right? Or vice versa. You know, nowadays, you know, wives could be clamped down on husbands, right? And either though physical or financial revenge, or even less than her, then the rechilas is not justified by your constructive intent, right? So the answer is, right, that by you saying you're not allowed to create more, by you trying to do the right thing and telling Reuven, right, to be able to take care of the harm that's being said to him, which if that will start causing other undue harm to the person that spoke, or like Judy said, maybe to the husband, maybe to the child, maybe to other people, right? If it's physical, emotional, financial, right? Then you're not allowed to be part of more harm happening, right? Even though it might protect this person, right? But that person has to work on himself. He has to realize that by him having such a temper, people will not be able to tell him that that people might, toelis of when people are saying things about him, because he is known as a bad-tempered person that will retaliate. that's on that person to work on himself. But regarding over here on the laws of rechilas, the rule of thumb is that if you, even though with the rules of toelis, you're allowed to say something, right? But if there is undue harm that will be caused by you saying something, means to say this guy or this gal will take revenge, or if you could think of a different kind of undue harm that might happen, right? But let's say revenge is probably the most common thing, right? Then you are not allowed to say something, because what you're doing now is perpetuating more harm, and you're not allowed to perpetuate more harm, right? All you're allowed to do with toelis is to try to help this person to prevent more harm happening to him and his family, right? But you're not allowed to be part of perpetuating more harm to be caused to other people, right? So that is the rule of thumb. And that's why this halacha is being said, because even though it sounds like a classic, if there's toelis, good. If there's no toelis, not good, right? Over here, we're saying is even if there is toelis, the caveat over here is that if there's undue harm, you're not allowed to be part of undue harm, even though there is toelis, and theoretically you'd be allowed to say something. Any questions or comments? Anybody? Nope. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so let's look at the grow your self-control. This is something very important, because I think this is something that certain, there are righteous people out there that have this totally in control, and hoots for them, right? But there are I've a lot of people in different levels, right? We have to work on this. How do we grow our self-control, right? Somebody does something wrong and you have a legitimate need to set him or her straight. For instance, right? Let's just make a classic. Your son used your tools without your permission, right? You have your tools, blah, blah, blah. Society has created an environment where men are all into their tools, right? Majority are, right? There are ladies that are into their tools too, but right, they're all into their tools. Not only that, but he doesn't put them away properly. That's the worst, right? Doesn't put them away properly, right? And now you want to finally fix that shaky table leg, but you can't find your toolbox, right? You can't find the right tool, right? Now, today you want to go ahead and fix that shaky leg. You're angry, and rightfully so. Your son shouldn't use other people's things without their permission, right? And to make matters worse, be careless with them, right? So you're angry, you're fuming, you're upset, right? Right? You want to set him straight, right? Right now, in the heat of your anger, you want to tell your wife how careless your son is, but instead, right, of this being in constructive, right, conversation about how to teach your son to be more responsible, is likely to be nothing more than complaining against him. Anger and lust and hara go hand in hand, right? Because it's not going to be constructive, right? Or if you want to go ahead and tell your kid off, right? Also, that's another. That won't be lashon hara. That's just an anger, but they're throwing this into lashon hara. So you want to tell your spouse, right? Or if your kid is married, right? You want to tell let's say it's your son-in-law, and you want to tell your daughter, right? Can you control your husband, right? He just takes my tools, right? Or if it's your son and you want to tell your daughter-in-law, right? My son, he's always been like this, always just taking things, and whoever it may be, or your good friend, your buddy that your drinking buddy, right? Whatever it is, right? Anger and lashon hara go hand in hand, because when you are angry, nothing constructive will come out of your words. Nothing, because you're saying it in a certain tone, right? You're just going to say extra things that are unnecessary, right? You're going to tell it to people that don't need to know, right? That have no say, or a way of fixing it, right? There is no toelis ever when you're angry. And even if you tell the perpetrators and themselves, your son, whatever it is, whoever it is, right? When you're angry, nothing good's going to come out of it. I know myself, I've fallen into this trap. Kids do something, whatever it is, and you get all angry and you scream at them, or you say things that I like saying in a heated voice, right? Heated conversation, right? Listen, we're all humans, God forbid never to turn into physical, of course, and not verbal abuse, but we're not even talking about that. We're not talking about verbal abuse. We're not talking about physical, right? That's more of an extreme, which has to be taken care of. And I'm not saying it's not out there. Of course it's out there. I'm not talking about that. It's not verbal abuse, God forbid. You're not like that. It's just, what are you doing? Why are you doing this, right? How can you weren't thinking, how many times I have to tell you, right? Nothing good about it. Nothing good about that. Right? Yes, unfortunately, as parents, as educators, more as parents, you have to show your kids that this is something important. And if they're doing something dangerous, you have to raise your voice, right? To get their attention. Sometimes they're just keep on doing it, right? And you have to try to balance that of how to make sure it's not out of anger, and just get them to go to your room and we'll talk about this later, right? Things like that, right? And that's always a difficult challenge, right? As a boss, getting frustrated and angry with your workers or whatever it is, they're not doing things properly. So anger is always, right? Not the time to say something. As I said, sometimes you just have to, as a parent, or to get them to stop what they're doing, right? And sometimes the only way is by raising your voice. Yes, that sometimes is, unfortunately, because they're just so involved in what they're doing, or whatever it is, right? But it should just be limited to getting them to stop and having that conversation later, because trying to discipline them in the way of education, of explaining to them what they did wrong or how we could work on this while you're angry is the wrong time. And if you're talking to someone else that's a co-parent, right, your spouse, right, or teacher or co-worker, or another supervisor or things like that, most probably it's just going to be less than hard, because it's probably not Toelis, because you're too angry to be able to actually say something constructive, to be able to help the person that did something wrong, right, for the conversation to lead to that, right? When you're angry, that's the wrong time to speak to the person's supervisor or whatever it is, another teacher or things like that. So the solution, says Rav Simcha Zissel, right? He's a famous Hasidic Rebbe, right? He said, in the love your neighbor, right? To wait until the anger, right, dissipates, goes away, right? We're not only allowed to correct someone who does wrong, we're obligated. Right? We have an obligation to correct someone that they do something wrong, right? If we have that authority. Again, it's just a stranger, right? They're not going to listen to you, so you're not allowed to do that. The Torah says, one should rebuke their friend. One should rebuke their friend. Excuse me, but make sure there's no sin. Right? We talked about this many times. It says the commentaries, make sure you're not doing sin while you are rebuking the person. It means to say, make sure you're rebuking them where there will be a purpose for that rebuke. So if they are not people that are going to listen to you, and we all know people that won't listen to us. I know people that won't listen to me, right? Either whatever, I'm too young, different denominator, whatever it is, they won't listen to me. Right? I'm not firm enough, whatever it is, right? There's always on a certain spectrum, there's gonna be people that won't listen to me. I know that. I'm cool with that. I'm fine with that, right? But there's no reason for me to tell them anything, right? Because there's no, what am I gonna do? If this is creating a mass and it's creating anger between us, right? So if I'm the rabbi in the shul, they listen to me or they don't listen to me if they think I'm right or wrong. But if they're doing something that's against the shul, so I go and tell them, listen, you don't have to think that I'm right or wrong, but this is the rules of the shul, and I have the authority of the shul right now, and you can't do this, right? I'm sorry if you don't like it, but that's the go somewhere else and do it, right? So, that I do have the right to do as an authority of the shul, right? Or in my house or at work, right? But if it's something that not necessarily connected to the shul. You see them, eating without a blessing, right? So, or you see them doing something else that you think is not the right thing to do, right? But it has nothing to do with the actual rules of the shul or not, right? It's their own personal growth. If you're not a person that has any, thing with them, right? So then why are you going? Why are you telling them something? This could create friction and things in between them, and it's not going to. Let's use don't do a sin, right? So we have an obligation, right? We have an obligation to right the wrong. And if it's your child, or if it's a spouse, or if it's a spouse, we have to be very delicate, right? How to say things, right? But if it's a student, if it's a worker, if it's a friend that listens to you, right? Or you listen to each other, you're there to help each other, and is happy when you correct them and things like that, right? So then you have to say something. You have an obligation. We have an obligation to help our fellow person to grow. But at the same time, make sure you do it when it's constructive, right? Right? By waiting until we're calm, even if it takes days or weeks, we can prevent our mitzvah from turning into lashon hara or ones dvarim. Right? We can prevent our mitzvah of helping our fellow person, right? Which is a mitzvah. We can prevent it from turning into an aveira, right? Unbelievable. It's you have a mitzvah. And by being in the wrong state of mind, you could turn that mitzvah into a terrible aveira. It's a terrible transgression of lashon hara, ones dvarim, talking negative about someone, right? Talking in a harmful way to someone or speaking about someone. So we have to know ourselves, right? And yeah, if you just if it's something immediate that you need to take care of, don't do that, right? Stop hitting your brother or sister, right? By doing this, your company's going to lose, $5,000 or whatever, even if it's $100, right? This whole project's going to go whatever. If you do, yes, you have to take care of the situation at hand and try to do it as calmly as possible, right? But educating them. Right, that component of education, going over to them and saying, "Hey, let's try to work on this. This is not the first time you've done this, right? We got to. Don't do it while you're angry. Right? Don't do it while you wait. Right? Wait a little bit. Right? Wait until you calm down, and then it'll be a much more constructive conversation. And also, most importantly, right, you won't risk into turning this mitzvah into an aveira of lashon hara and rechilas. Right, and I think it's a tremendous lesson in life, right? That sometimes we just have to wait a little bit, right? Pirkei Avot says, I forgot which rabbi said, I think it's Rav Shimon, right, or Rav Gamliel, I think said that he grew up in a house full of rabbis, right? His father was a head rabbi. People would come all the time over and speak, whatever. He says, I haven't seen a better character trait than silence, right? Than silence. Right? Doesn't mean to say that he didn't say anything. Doesn't mean to say that he didn't speak up when needed to, but he knew when not to say something, right? And that takes talent. That is a sign of wisdom. It's easy to say something. It's easy to say something. It's much harder when you want to say something to know when is the right time to say something and to keep quiet. But sometimes just be a listener. Sometimes just hold yourself back and not say anything and wait a little bit. Right, until things calm. That is the way you can prevent yourself from turning your mitzvah into an aveira, right? And also that you're gonna be much more constructive, and your words will have much more of an impact when it's not coming from anger, right? And when the person knows that you had time to think about it, and you put a plan, and you're going to talk to them in a proper way and with a respectful way, right, and try to deal with what the issue is at hand. Right, and that's something that we have to really work on and make sure that we start controlling, start working on. And really, the quote of the day fits right into this in the Pel Yoetz, right? He says like this. It's a medieval commentary. It says, "As water extinguishes fire, right? So does silence nullify the strength of anger." right? Along exactly what we're just saying. There's no greater character trait than being quiet, right? Water puts out fire. Being quiet, right, also nullifies the strength of anger. Now, I just want to add a little caveat, and that's I was just pushing a little bit. If you have a tremendous fire, if you have a small fire, right, and you wait a little bit, right, and you then let it get big and a little big, right, and the little water is not going to do anything, right? So you have to know, and that's what I'm saying. You have to nip the thing at the bud. You have to, and that's where the real challenge is. If something bad is happening right now, you have to, if you're the person, you have to say something. You have to do something about it. It's the next point of how we're going to deal with this, right? Or who am I going to go speak to the coworker about this, right? We have to take care of this situation. You took care of the problem at hand. It's the next step. Right? How are you going to deal with it? How are you going to educate this person? Right? How are you going to speak to your coworker? How are you going to speak to your spouse about this? How are you going to speak to your daughter or daughter-in-law about this, or your son or your son-in-law about this? Right? It's just, we really love having the kids around the house, right? We love it, but we're getting older, and it's just, just if you could just be a little more on top of that, right? Or if you could, tell them that, they can't color on the walls, right? Or, whatever it is, so you take care of the problem. At that moment of time, you don't talk to your children or your spouse, whoever it is that you want to talk about how to deal with the situation, right? To educate the situation, make sure it doesn't happen again. That's when we're talking about that we have to wait, reflect, get that anger out, and then deal with the situation, right? But if there's an immediate problem going on, it doesn't mean to say, well, we're just going to wait until I calm down while the whole house is getting all colored up, right? We're just going to wait until, we calm down. And, in the meantime, this person is ruining the whole program because of carelessness or whatever it is, right? Well, just wait until I calm down, and tell the security guard, not to be hanging out and schmoozing in the social hall instead of being in front and actually being a security guard, right? Whatever it is, right? You have to, if there's something at hand that you could take care of right now, you have to take care of that, right? Because if you don't, right, quiet is just going to make the matters worse, right? And the situation is going to be worse. What it's referring to is after that, right? Education. Right. And that's what they're saying. How am I going to deal with my child to tell them how to take care of it? I want to talk to he's lazy, he's careless, right? We have to work on this. Don't do that when you're angry. Right. And I think that's a great lesson. And, just to tie it in a little bit into the time period that we're in, right? We're in the 3 weeks now. We started the 3 weeks, Sunday, 3 weeks, which lead up to Tisha B'Av, right? The first of 9 days, and then the 3 weeks. As we know, this is a hard time for the Jewish people, right? It's a difficult time for the Jewish people. Rosh Chodesh of the beginning of the 9 days is Friday the 29th, right? In a little more than a week. And then Tisha B'Av is a week later, Sunday a week later, right? It's on a Sunday this year. That's pissed off. It's really supposed to be a Shabbos. Right? But we know that the second temple was destroyed because of baselit hatred. Right? Where's baselit hatred comes from? It comes from not stopping to reflect and to think about what your words are saying. And there's a famous story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. I'm not going to go through the whole story, but basically there was two people. One name was Kamsa, one name was Bar Kamsa. A little confusing, right? And there was one of them was. There was another person that was friendly with one and angry with the other one, whatever it is. And he made a party, and the messenger misunderstood and invited the wrong one. He invited his enemy and not his friend. So the guy thought, okay, maybe he's trying to make up, whatever it is. So he came, right? And when the host saw that this person, the enemy came, right? He got all upset. He said, get out of here, right? In front of everybody. He said, no, don't embarrass me. Like, he said, I'll pay for my meal. He said, no, I don't want you here. He said, I'll pay for I'll pay for the whole thing. Right? And he said, no, get out of here. I don't want to. And it made the person really angry. Right? And then he went and spoke to the Romans instead of Jewish people. And again, that was one of the things that led to the destruction of the temple. Right? But just stopping to think right then, you're right. I don't want him here, right? But what's his feelings, right? I need to, I need to reflect. I need to think. I'm in an angry state right now. I'm not happy that he's here. Or anytime, based on hatred, just saying things about other people or reacting in certain ways. If we just stopped and not let our anger control ourselves, say, let me deal with this in 5 minutes. Let me deal with this in a half hour. Let me deal with this tomorrow, right? We would reevaluate how we deal and react with things, right? And that will be hopefully a tikkun, a merit, right? A way of fixing, right? To allow the Beis Hamikdash, the temple, to be rebuilt and to get out of this exile, right? And I think this is something that we really should, and I know myself, work on, right? To just take a deep breath, right? Relax, digest. How do I react? How do I respond? What's the best way to do it? Right? Because when you respond in the proper way, magic can happen. When you respond in the wrong way, damage happens. Right? Disaster. Right? Disaster happens. So during this period of time when we're working on those things, and it's not only that, it's also this concept of waiting. It's for anger, but it's really for a lot of other things also. The first temple was destroyed because of sfichas damim, killing people, and idol worshiping, and adultery, right? So maybe we're not talking at the extent of actually killing people, but hurting people and things like that. If you just stop, right, and say, what am I doing? Right? Really, is this really the proper relationship that I should have? Right? I have a spouse at home, right? I have okay, maybe it's to stop flirting so much, or in the workplace, or things like that. If it's when we get caught up in the moment and we don't stop and just say, is the action I'm doing right now a correct action? Right? Is idolatry? Okay, we're not talking about bound down to a tree, but our idolatry in our days is social media. Our idolatry in our days is our money. Our idolatry nowadays is the concept of we need to have all the possessions in the world. Is that what really is the most important thing in the world? Right? If we just stop and think for a second, what's really the best way of my time? What's really the best way to spend my money? Right? What's really the most important thing to post on social media or whatever? If we just stopped for a few minutes and not just get caught up in our lives, get caught up in the situation, right? We would be so much better people, and I'm talking to myself. Right? We'd be so much better people in our relationship with God and our mitzvot and not doing transgressions, right? If we just stopped and say, what's really my purpose in life, right? And, that's what we spoke about this past Shabbos, in the sermon, right? Bilam didn't stop, right? Last week's parsha spoke about Bilam. Right? Bilam did not stop. There's no pause in the whole parsha of Bilam. I'm talking about Bilam, right? There's no letter pei or samach, which makes a break in the Torah, right? Is because teaching us that Bilam just didn't stop to think about his actions, about what he was doing, right? He just didn't stop to think about what he was doing. He just kept on going, right? He had a donkey talking to him, and he started talking back to the donkey, right? He didn't notice the surroundings. He didn't notice what was going on, right? And if we just take a moment, right? And that's really what Shabbos is all about, right? Shabbos is to take a moment, see where we're heading, right? See what we're doing. Turn off all the distractions. Those are that's a key thing to really help us make sure that we stay on the right path and we're doing the right thing. So, let's just all try to work on this just a little bit. And I know myself, I'm going to try also, right? In our speech, in our anger, and that's what this book is talking about, but really in life in general, just to stop and reflect, right? What am I doing? Where am I going? Right? What's important in life? Right? Is this the right thing? Should I, be a little more cautious of how I act in the office? Right? Should I be a little more cautious how I act amongst my friends? Right? Sometimes we don't even realize, kiddos, things like that. People don't realize they just flirt. I'm not saying anything will turn into anything. That's not what I'm saying, right? But it's not necessarily the best behavior, right? Of conduct of between the opposite genders, right? I know society nowadays thinks everything's okay, but that's not okay. It's not okay, right? It's not okay. Should be certain standards. So it's just to reflect and to stop and not to get caught up in the moment. And that's really the depth of what it means I didn't see a better character trait than Stika, being quiet, not necessarily just physical with our speech, but really with our action, just to stop and to reflect. I just want to thank all of you. Right, I know we're continuing this class, so hopefully we'll see you all again once we reestablish it, when we get settled and know my schedule in St. Louis. And I'm really looking forward to that. But I just want to thank all of you. Especially, I'm glad that Emily's on here right today. A special shout out to Emily, who really started this Wednesday morning class in her home, right? Way back when. You remember that, Emily? Right? Way back when, in her home. Not almost 9 years ago. I think this was actually, we started this class before the lunch and learns, right? So I know we made a whole thing about the lunch and learns, but this class started before the lunch and learns. We started with Pirkei Avos, right? We did that for about 6 years, right? And then we did my minus 13 principles of faith, and we did the six mitzvahs to mimios, right? 6 consecutive mitzvot, right? We've gone through, thank God, a whole bunch of wonderful lessons and working together, and it's really great conversation and talking with each other and really being able to clarify things on a one-on-one basis while we're still with the group, and that's really the power of all of us working together, and it's not one person, but I do want to give a special shout out to Emily for starting this class and being part of it consecutively throughout, right? And really thank you all for making this class a great success. So with that, I will turn the recording off, and